The fluorescent lights of the international terminal hummed a tired, indifferent song. Maeve Calloway stood behind the long gray counter of the lost and found office, her sensible shoes aching on the cold linoleum floor. A traveler, a woman with cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, and a handbag that cost more than Maeve's monthly rent, leaned forward. Her voice dripped with condescension. "I've been waiting for 15 minutes. Can you move any slower? Honestly, they'll hire anyone for these public-facing roles, won't they? Even someone so substantial." The woman's gaze flicked down Maeve's full, curvy figure, a smirk twisting her lips. Maeve felt the familiar heat crawl up her neck, a flush of shame she had spent 32 years trying to extinguish. She kept her voice steady, her hands calm as she typed. "I'm accessing the international database now, ma'am. Your bag was routed through Frankfurt. It will arrive on the next Lufthansa flight." The woman sniffed, snatching the claim ticket as if it were contaminated. Maeve watched her click away on stiletto heels, the sound a series of tiny, sharp judgments. This was her life, a curvy, plus-size woman, in a world that prized speed and sleekness. She was the human buffer for lost possessions and bruised egos. She was invisible, a soft, forgettable piece of the airport's machinery. Her supervisor, Gerald, a man whose belt buckle fought a losing battle with his gut, materialized beside her. "Calloway, stop daydreaming. The private aviation terminal sent over 2 high-priority items, identical black suitcases. VIP clients. Do not, I repeat, do not mess this up. These aren't tourists. These are the kind of people who can have you fired with a single phone call." He dropped 2 heavy, black hard-shell suitcases onto her counter with a grunt. They were, to the untrained eye, exactly the same. 0 Halliburton, brushed aluminum, no external logos. The kind of luggage that whispered old money and new threats. Maeve's heart gave a small, familiar thump, not of fear, but of focus. The world blurred when she looked at objects. Faces were hard, names were harder. But things had stories. She saw scratches, stickers, the way a zipper pull was bent, the ghost of a coffee stain on a handle. Gerald was already walking away, muttering about overtime budgets. Maeve pulled the first suitcase closer. The passenger manifest clipped to the handle read, "Volkov, D Flight VK001, Moscow." The second read, "Marchetti, L Flight LM007, Naples." 2 names that meant nothing to her, but the air around them felt heavier. She began her ritual. She checked the wheels for unique wear. She examined the combination locks for tiny scratches. She ran a finger along the rubber seal, and then she saw it. A ribbon. A simple, black grosgrain ribbon, tied around the retractable handle of the Marchetti suitcase. It was a common enough identifier, but Maeve's mind, a vast, chaotic library of details, snagged on it. She had seen a photo of this suitcase an hour ago, a digital intake scan from the private terminal. In the scan, the ribbon's knot had been on the left side. Now, the knot was on the right. It was a minuscule detail, a millimeter of difference, but to Maeve, it was a scream. Someone had untied and retied it. Someone had switched the bags. The realization was a cold drop of mercury sliding down her spine. These weren't just lost bags. This was a message, a trap. She looked up, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the glass walls of the lost and found office, she saw the private aviation lounge. 2 groups of men stood in separate, climate-controlled bubbles of animosity. One group, dressed in impeccably cut Italian suits, radiated a coiled, Mediterranean intensity. The other, in darker, heavier wool coats, possessed the still, frozen violence of a Russian winter. At the center of each group stood a man who commanded gravity. Luca Marchetti, the heir to the Marchetti syndicate, was a blade in human form. His dark hair was swept back, his eyes the color of obsidian, and his suit fit him like a second skin of armor. He wasn't looking at the Russian group, but every line of his body was aware of them. Dante Volkov, the head of the Volkov Bratva, was a glacier. Taller, broader, with a shaved head and a beard that was more salt than pepper. His stillness was more terrifying than any overt threat. He held a leather dossier and did not blink. These were Mafia bosses, men who decided life and death with a nod. And someone had just tried to light a match between them, using two identical suitcases. Maeve knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that if she handed over the wrong bag, the consequences would be catastrophic. A misplaced document, a planted piece of evidence, a symbolic insult. It would be the spark for a war. Gerald's voice crackled over the intercom. "Calloway, what's the holdup? Get those bags to the VIP lounge now. Mr. Marchetti's head of security is asking questions." Maeve's hand hovered over the phone. She could call security. She could tell Gerald, but Gerald would dismiss her. He always did. He'd call her paranoid, a fat girl seeing conspiracies in ribbons. The security team was a joke, more interested in patting down teenagers for weed than investigating a potential Mafia assassination by luggage. She was alone. The familiar, suffocating weight of being underestimated pressed down on her. She was just the curvy clerk, the invisible woman behind the counter. No one would believe her. But she couldn't let a war start. Not on her watch. Taking a deep breath that strained the buttons of her uniform blouse, Maeve made a decision. She would not bring the bags to them. She would make them come to her. She picked up the internal phone and dialed the private aviation concierge, her voice surprisingly steady. "This is Maeve Calloway in Lost and Found. There's a critical security discrepancy with the Marchetti and Volkov luggage. I need both principals, and only the principals, to come to the Lost and Found office immediately. No security. No assistants. Just them. Tell them it's about a ribbon." She hung up before the stunned concierge could argue. The next 3 minutes were the longest of Maeve's life. She stood behind her counter, a curvy, soft-bodied woman in a polyester uniform, waiting for two of the most dangerous men in the world to walk through her door. She smoothed a stray curl of her auburn hair, her round cheeks flushed. She could feel the sweat on her palms. The glass door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The air changed. It became thinner, charged with ozone and expensive cologne. Luca Marchetti entered first, his dark eyes sweeping the room with predatory disinterest before landing on her. He was even more intimidating up close. His presence was a physical force, a low-frequency hum of danger. Dante Volkov followed a moment later, his massive frame filling the doorway. His face was an unreadable mask of granite, but his pale blue eyes held a flicker of cold curiosity. They stood on opposite sides of her counter, two apex predators forced into a small, fluorescent-lit cage. The silence was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Luca Marchetti spoke first, his voice a low, silken baritone, with a faint Italian accent. "You are the one who summoned us, with a message about a ribbon. This had better be worth my time." His gaze flicked over her, a quick, dismissive assessment that she felt like a physical blow. She was not what he expected. She was not sleek, not dangerous, not part of his world. She was a soft, insignificant obstacle. Dante Volkov remained silent, his stare a more invasive, dissecting thing. He was looking at her hands, her face, the way she held herself. He was looking for the lie. Maeve's throat was dry. "My name is Maeve Calloway," she said, her voice a little too high. She cleared her throat and forced it lower. "I'm the senior Lost and Found clerk. These are your suitcases." She gestured to the two identical bags on the counter. "They are not what they appear to be." Luca's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. "They are suitcases. My suitcase. And his. He tilted his head toward Volkov. The problem is simple. Give me mine, give him his, and we will leave. No, Mr. Marchetti, Maeve said, the words tasting like copper. The problem is that someone has already switched them, intentionally. The bag with your flight tag is not your bag, and the bag with Mr. Volkov's tag is not his. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb's fuse burning down. Dante Volkov finally spoke, his voice a low rumble with a thick Russian accent. Explain. Quickly. Maeve pointed to the ribbon on the Marchetti-tagged suitcase. This ribbon, when the bag was scanned at the private terminal intake, the knot was on the left. I saw the digital scan. Now, the knot is on the right. It's been untied and retied. Someone opened this bag or switched the entire case and made a small mistake when they put the ribbon back. She then pointed to a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the Volkov-tagged suitcase's combination lock. This scratch, it's fresh. It wasn't in the intake photo. Someone picked this lock recently. The metal is still bright. She took a breath. I believe the contents of these suitcases have been tampered with to create a false flag, to make one of you believe the other has betrayed or stolen from you. Luca Marchetti's dismissive arrogance vanished. In its place was a terrifying, absolute focus. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the counter, his dark eyes boring into hers. He was no longer looking at a curvy, insignificant clerk. He was looking at a woman who had just seen what his entire security apparatus had missed. You are telling me, he said, his voice dangerously soft, that you deduced a plot against two of the most powerful families in the world, based on a ribbon and a scratch? Yes, Maeve whispered, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could see it through her blouse. I notice things. It's what I do. Dante Volkov let out a low, humorless chuckle. It was a chilling sound. The little bird has sharp eyes. He turned his gaze to Luca. It seems, Marchetti, we have a common problem. Someone wants us to bleed each other. Luca didn't look at him. His eyes were still locked on Maeve. Who else knows about this? No one, she said. I called you directly. My supervisor thinks I'm just being slow. A new, sharp voice cut through the tension. What is the meaning of this? Gerald, her supervisor, had appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of bureaucratic fury. Calloway, you do not summon VIP clients to the back office. I've had the head of Marchetti Security screaming at me for 5 minutes. You're done. You hear me? You're finished. He stormed toward the counter, his finger jabbing the air in her direction. I've put up with your incompetence for years, you fat, useless cow. But this is the final. He never finished the sentence. Luca Marchetti moved with a liquid, lethal grace. One moment he was leaning on the counter. The next, he had Gerald by the throat, not squeezing, just holding him with an immovable, terrifying pressure against the wall. Gerald's face went from red to purple, his eyes bulging with shock. You will not speak to her, Luca said, his voice a silken whisper that was more frightening than a shout. You will not look at her. You will not breathe the same air as her without her permission. Do you understand? Gerald made a choked, gurgling sound. Luca released him, and he slumped to the floor, gasping. Luca pulled a crisp white handkerchief from his breast pocket and wiped his fingers as if he had touched something filthy. He turned back to Maeve, his expression unreadable. It appears, Miss Calloway, that you have just lost your job and gained a new one. Dante Volkov, who had watched the entire scene with an impassive, almost clinical interest, nodded slowly. The woman has proven her value. She is a neutral party. She has no loyalty to either of us, only to the truth. I agree. She will work for us both, as an independent auditor, until we find the traitor. Maeve's mind reeled. She had gone from being publicly humiliated and fired to being hired by two mafia bosses. This wasn't a job offer. It was a conscription, a golden cage. I don't want to work for the mafia, she stammered. Luca's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a beautiful, terrifying expression. You misunderstand, Miss Calloway. This is not a request. You have made yourself the only person both Mr. Volkov and I can trust. That makes you the most valuable asset in this airport, and a very vulnerable one. You will come with me. Now, my people will secure the real suitcases. He gestured, and two men in dark suits materialized as if from the shadows. They began carefully photographing and handling the luggage. Maeve looked at Gerald, still wheezing on the floor. A man who had tormented her for years, now broken by a single, effortless act of violence. She looked at Dante Volkov, a cold, calculating statue. And she looked at Luca Marchetti, a man of fire and shadow, who had just defended her honor, with a brutality that should have repulsed her, but instead ignited a strange, terrifying spark of safety. She had no choice. She was no longer invisible. She was a target, and her only protection was the most dangerous man she had ever met. Luca offered her his arm. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a command. Let's go, Miss Calloway. We have a traitor to find. Maeve didn't take his arm. She walked past him, her chin held high, her curvy body a statement of defiance in the sterile hallway. She was terrified, but she would not be dragged. She would walk into this new, dark world on her own 2 feet. The private elevator ride was silent. The air smelled of Luca's cologne, sandalwood, bergamot, and something darker, like gunpowder. He stood too close, his presence a constant, unnerving pressure. The elevator didn't go up to the departure level. It went down, to a sub-basement she didn't know existed. The doors opened onto a private, underground garage. A convoy of black SUVs waited, engines running. This was the hidden infrastructure of power, the world beneath the world. Luca led her to the middle car, opening the door himself. A surprising, almost chivalrous gesture. "Where are we going?" Maeve asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "To a safe location," Luca said, sliding in beside her. The interior of the SUV was a cocoon of black leather and polished wood. "My penthouse in the city. It is the most secure place for you right now. Mr. Volkov will be conducting his own parallel investigation. We will share information through you. So I'm a hostage," Maeve said, a bitter edge to her voice. "A buffer." Luca turned to look at her, his dark eyes intense in the dim light of the car. "You are a shield, Miss Calloway. A very clever, very unexpected shield. The person who switched those suitcases wanted a war. They will not be pleased that you stopped it. They will try to kill you. I intend to prevent that." The casual way he said, "kill you," sent a shiver down her spine. This was her life now. The SUV pulled out into the rainy city night, the lights of the skyline smearing into streaks of gold and red. Maeve watched the world she knew disappear, replaced by a labyrinth of danger and dark luxury. She thought of her small apartment, her cat, her collection of vintage teacups. A life so small and quiet, it had been a form of self-erasure. She had been invisible because it was safer. Now she was the most visible woman in the city's underworld. The penthouse was a monument to masculine wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a carpet of glittering jewels against the black velvet of the night. The furniture was minimalist, all sharp angles and dark leather. It was a space designed for control, not comfort. A severe-looking woman in a black pantsuit appeared. "This is Anya," Luca said. "She will take care of your immediate needs. Clothes, toiletries. You are a size—" He paused, his gaze traveling over her body, not with judgment, but with a calculating, almost proprietary assessment. "Anya will know." Maeve felt a flash of anger. "I can take care of myself." "Not anymore," Luca said, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Your old life is over, Miss Calloway. The sooner you accept that, the safer you will be. Anya, the Rose Room." Anya nodded and gestured for Maeve to follow. The Rose Room was a guest suite, decorated in shades of blush and cream, a stark, almost jarring contrast to the rest of the penthouse. It was a room designed for a woman, but it felt like a stage set. On the king-sized bed lay a selection of clothes, not the cheap, functional polyester of her uniform, but soft cashmere sweaters, silk blouses, and perfectly tailored trousers in rich jewel tones, all in her size, all designed to celebrate a curvy, full figure, not hide it. Maeve ran her hand over a cashmere wrap the color of a deep merlot. The fabric was impossibly soft. It was the most luxurious thing she had ever touched. She felt a lump form in her throat. It was a bribe, a beautiful, thoughtful, terrifying bribe. She was being dressed, housed, and protected by a Mafia boss. She was his asset, his pet. The thought should have filled her with dread. Instead, a small, traitorous part of her felt something else. Seen. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her not as a problem to be ignored, but as a puzzle to be solved, a treasure to be guarded. Luca Marchetti saw her, and his gaze was a fire that could either warm her or burn her alive. She chose a simple forest green cashmere sweater and a pair of black trousers. The clothes fit her perfectly, skimming her curves in a way that felt both elegant and powerful. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't see the invisible airport clerk. She saw a woman of substance, a woman with a secret, a woman who was about to walk into a lion's den and demand answers. She found Luca in his study, a room lined with books and monitors displaying security feeds. He was on the phone, his Italian rapid and sharp. He hung up when he saw her. His eyes swept over her, and something flickered in their dark depths. Not quite a smile, but a softening, an approval. "Green suits you," he said. "It brings out the gold in your hair." The compliment was so unexpected, so personal, that Maeve felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. Now, tell me about the suitcases. What was really in them?" Luca gestured for her to sit on a leather Chesterfield sofa. He remained standing, a predator who preferred the high ground. Mr. Volkov's case contained a ledger, a very detailed, very incriminating ledger of my family's financial operations in the Mediterranean, the kind of document that would give him a significant advantage in our negotiations. "And your case?" Maeve asked. "My case contained a Fabergé egg, a priceless heirloom that belongs to the Volkov family. It was stolen from his grandfather's collection during the Soviet collapse. To have it returned in such a way, planted in my luggage, would be a declaration of war, a taunt. Proof that I had not only stolen from him, but was mocking him with it." Maeve's mind raced. "So the switch was designed to make Mr. Volkov think you were a thief and a liar, and to make you think he had acquired your most sensitive secrets. A perfect, two-way trap." "Exactly," Luca said, his voice grim. "The traitor is someone with access to both our organizations, someone high up, and you, Miss Calloway, are going to help me find him." "How?" she asked. "I don't know your world." "You know details," Luca said, leaning forward, his intensity filling the room. "You see what others miss. I have the passenger manifests, the security logs, the background checks on every person who touched those planes. I need you to look at them, find the anomaly, find the ribbon that is tied the wrong way." He handed her a heavy tablet. The screen was filled with documents, photos, and timestamps. It was a mountain of data. To anyone else, it would be an impossible task. To Maeve, It was a library, waiting to be read. She started with the intake photos from the private terminal. She zoomed in on the hands of the baggage handlers. She cross-referenced their employee IDs with the flight manifests. She looked at the shoes of the pilots, the coffee cups on the tarmac, the angle of the security cameras. Hours passed. The city lights outside the window began to fade as a gray dawn crept over the skyline. Luca watched her, a silent, brooding presence. He refilled her water glass without being asked. He adjusted the lighting. He was a predator, but he was also a perfect host, anticipating her needs before she voiced them. Finally, Maeve found it. It wasn't a person. It was a car. A black town car with diplomatic plates that had been parked near the Volkov jet for 7 minutes. The log said it was a driver for a minor consular official. But Maeve zoomed in on the reflection in the car's window. In the reflection, she could see the driver's hand, and on his wrist was a watch. A very specific, very rare Patek Philippe. She had seen that watch before. She had seen it in a photo on Luca's desk. A photo of him with his inner circle. "Who is this man?" she asked, turning the tablet to show Luca. The blood drained from Luca's face. It was the first time she had seen him look anything other than perfectly controlled. He looked like a man who had just been stabbed in the back by a ghost. "That," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rasp, "is my brother. Nico." The revelation hung in the air, a toxic cloud. Nico Marchetti, the younger brother, the charming, less driven one, the one who was always in Luca's shadow. He had orchestrated the entire thing. He had access to Luca's operations. He had the charm to cultivate a mole within the Volkov organization. He wanted a war that would weaken Luca, allowing him to stage a coup and take over the family. The betrayal was so deep, so personal, that it was a physical wound. Maeve saw the pain flash in Luca's eyes before it was ruthlessly suppressed, replaced by a cold, murderous fury. "He is meeting with one of my capos this morning," Luca said, his voice flat. "A breakfast meeting at the Hotel Bellagio to discuss security upgrades. It's a cover. He's consolidating his power." "What are you going to do?" Maeve whispered. "I am going to crash a breakfast," Luca said, a terrifying smile gracing his lips. "And you are coming with me." The Hotel Bellagio was a monument to old-world luxury. Its private dining room a temple of white tablecloths and glittering chandeliers. Nico Marchetti was a younger, softer version of his brother, handsome in a boyish way, with an easy smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was laughing with a group of men when Luca walked in, Maeve a silent, curvy shadow at his side. The laughter died. The room went cold. "Luca," Nico said, his smile faltering. "What a surprise. I didn't expect you. We were just discussing the new perimeter protocols." "Were you?" Luca's voice was deceptively calm. He pulled out a chair for Maeve, a gesture of public deference that made every man in the room stare. A curvy, unknown woman being seated by the boss before a word of business was spoken. It was a statement. "I've come to discuss a different kind of security breach. A suitcase." Nico's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you, fratello?" Luca said, the Italian endearment dripping with venom. He placed the tablet on the table, the image of the car and the watch clearly visible. A Patek Philippe. Very rare. Father gave one to each of us. You were at the airport. You orchestrated the switch, with a mole you planted in Volkov's ground crew 6 months ago. A man named Sergei, who has a gambling debt you kindly paid off. It was a bluff. A brilliant, deductive bluff, based on the tiny threads Maeve had helped him weave together. But Nico's face confirmed it was true. The charming mask shattered, revealing the bitter, ambitious man beneath. "You were always in my way," Nico spat. "The perfect son. The heir. I was tired of waiting for you to fall. A war with the Russians would have crippled you. I would have been the savior who picked up the pieces. The other men at the table were frozen, unsure whose side to take. The tension was a physical weight. You would have burned our family to the ground for your own ambition, Luca said, his voice finally rising, a crack of thunder in the quiet room. You are no longer a Marchetti. You are nothing. He didn't need to raise a hand. The public exposure, the revelation of his brother's treachery in front of loyal capos, was a fate worse than death in their world. Nico was finished. His power, his reputation, his future, all of it evaporated in the space of a single, devastating conversation. Security guards, men loyal to Luca, materialized and escorted a stunned, silent Nico from the room. The other capos quickly swore their renewed loyalty to Luca, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. Maeve sat perfectly still, her heart hammering. She had just witnessed the destruction of a man, not with a bullet, but with the truth. It was more terrifying than any violence. Luca turned to her, his dark eyes unreadable. He took her hand, his grip firm and warm. He raised it to his lips and pressed a slow, deliberate kiss to her knuckles. It was an act of possession, of gratitude, of a promise. It was done in front of his entire inner circle. This woman, Luca announced, his voice carrying through the silent room, saved my family. She saved the Volkov family. She is under my personal protection. Any disrespect to her is a disrespect to me, and you all know the consequences of that. The men nodded, their eyes averted. Maeve was no longer an asset. She was a queen in a world of kings, her power not in violence, but in her mind. The final piece of the puzzle was the public reconciliation with Dante Volkov. It took place in the same private airport lounge where the nightmare had begun. The two Mafia bosses faced each other, the air still thick with decades of mistrust. But this time, Maeve stood between them, not as a clerk, but as an equal. She reconstructed the entire timeline for them, from the moment the bags were loaded in Moscow and Naples to the moment Nico's reflection was caught in a car window. Her voice was clear, her logic unassailable. She was the neutral party, the arbiter of truth. When she finished, Dante Volkov, the human glacier, did something unexpected. He gave a small, formal bow in her direction. "Miss Calloway," he rumbled, "you have my gratitude and my respect. The Volkov family owes you a debt." Luca Marchetti stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The touch was a brand, a public claim. "The Marchetti family's debt to you is even greater," he said, his voice for her alone. "You are the only neutral person we both trust. You will be the official liaison between our families, a position of immense power and safety." It was the payoff. The war was stopped. The cruel supervisor, Gerald, was fired that morning after a full audit of his department, his career destroyed by the very system he had used to bully Maeve. And Maeve Calloway, the curvy, invisible, lost and found clerk, had become the most trusted woman in the city's underworld. Weeks later, Maeve stood on the balcony of Luca's penthouse, the city lights a familiar, glittering map at her feet. She wore a custom-tailored dress of midnight blue silk that hugged her generous curves, a gift from Luca. He had given her a world of luxury, protection, and purpose. But he had also given her something more dangerous. He had given her his attention. He joined her on the balcony, his presence a familiar, thrilling shadow. He didn't speak for a long moment, just stood beside her, looking out at the city he controlled. "I have spent my life surrounded by people who wanted my power, my money, or my death," he finally said, his voice low. "You are the first person who simply wanted the truth. You saw a wrong knot and a tiny scratch, and you decided to stop a war. You are the bravest person I have ever met." He turned to her, his dark eyes intense. I told you once that you were a shield. I was wrong. You are not a shield, Maeve. You are the sword. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle. I see you, he whispered, echoing the very thing she had longed for her entire life. All of you, your brilliance, your courage, your softness. And I am never letting you go. He kissed her then, a deep, possessive, soul-searing kiss that tasted of danger, promise, and a dark, consuming love. It was a kiss that claimed her, not as a possession, but as a partner. Maeve Calloway, the woman who was once invisible, had not just stopped a war, she had captured a king, and in his arms, surrounded by the glittering spoils of a dark empire, she finally felt seen. She finally felt safe. She finally felt like the most powerful woman in the world.